This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forstag, our managing director, and Jenna Forstrom, our community manager. This week, we're talking about what successful people do differently. Our show is brought to you by Hack the Hidden Job Market, the new online course from Mac's List that starts November 1st. As many as 8 out of 10 job openings never get advertised. Is your dream job one of them? Learn how to uncover hidden jobs and get noticed by the hiring managers who fill them. Visit maxlist.org/course. Successful people share common habits no matter what field they may work in. What are the most important qualities you need to cultivate in order to enjoy success in your career? Our guest expert this week has the answer. Don Hutcheson has interviewed more than 350 successful people. Later in the show, I talk to him about the common habits these people share and how you can adopt them in your work life. Do your friends and family really know what you do for a living? Come on, admit it. Half the relatives at your last family reunion didn't have a clue what you do at the office all day. Now imagine if your professional contacts don't know the answer to that question. Ben Forstag has a solution. In a moment, Ben will share an easy formula you can use to answer the question, what do you do? How do you find a career coach if you're a recent college graduate? That's our question of the week. It comes from listener Sue Black. Jenna Forstrom shares her advice later in the show. First, as always, however, let's check in with the Mac's List team. Now, Jenna, Ben, you've both had successful careers. What's the number one quality you think has contributed the most to your success?
For me, what helps me be successful, I think, is the fact that I'm a natural includer and networker. I always love connecting people, and I think I don't do it with the hopes of getting anything out of it, like financial or like a business idea or whatever. I just want people to get along and collaborate and be creative. And so it's just really easy to hand out free, invites to things. So setting up networking events or informationals for other people. Like if me and Mac were talking about something and he mentioned that he had an opportunity, it's like I want to just help him out, and then I want to help my friends out that might be also interested in that kind of career path or something. So that's for me. How about you, Ben?
Well, I'm going to bring up a catchphrase from my old camping days, which is, I will clean toilets. And that was the phrase we used at camp, which is basically the catchphrase for I'll do anything. Whatever we need to do today, we're going to get together as a team and do it. And I've really embraced that in my career, where you've got your formal job description as it's written down on paper, and then there's everything else. And that everything else is usually 90% of what you spend your time doing. And I've really tried to make it a point of embracing that everything else and jumping in where help is needed, helping my colleagues, taking on new projects if I have the bandwidth to do it. And I think that's the fun part too. And it's a good employable skill as well.
Yeah, I've seen those qualities in both of you in our time working together. And in your case, Jenna, you have a great network and you get excited about reaching out to people, whether it's or for an event or inviting them to be on the podcast. And I think it serves you well. And you also had us all organized during Burger Week here in Portland.
So good.
Yeah, it was good. And there were a lot of good sandwiches, but you were getting people out as a group to restaurants every day of the week. And Ben, I see that quality in you as well, just the willingness to take on any job. And as you were speaking, though, I was reminded of myself. I got a job once when I was out of work for a while, trying to break back into restaurants when I was in college. And I kept getting turned down, and I wrote on one of my job applications, "We'll wash dishes." And that's how I got hired at that restaurant. The manager said, "Oh, you'll wash dishes. I'll hire anybody who'll do that." So that's that too is a quality that served me well.
I think washing dishes is probably a half step up from cleaning toilets.
It's a little cleaner. It was pretty hot in the Iowa summer there with all that steam. But as for me, I think that work ethic that all three of us share, but my work ethic, I think, has helped me a lot in my teens and 20s at the start of my career. And later, I think curiosity and that excitement about connecting, relationship building that Jenna has as well are additional qualities. Well, terrific. Well, let's turn back to you, Ben, because every week you're out there looking around the internet. in search of websites, books, or other tools our listeners can use in their job search. What have you uncovered for us this week?
So this week, I'm going to share a blog post from themuse.com. It was written by Alexandra Franzen, and it's called How to Tell People What You Do and Be Remembered. So I think we've all had the experience when we're out at a networking event and someone asks you like, hey, what do you do? Or at a party, you get this a lot too. And you tell them, and you can tell like as you're telling them what you're doing or what you do, it's in one ear out the other. Either they're not paying attention or it just doesn't stick or they don't even really know what you're talking about. Certainly I've had this experience talking to my own family. They just can't quite get their mind around what I do.
I've had uncles come up to my friends at family events and say, what does Mac really do for a living?
Yeah, like there's some secret we're hiding from everyone. So Alexandra here has this really good blog post all about how you can communicate what you do in very simple terms. And she starts with this quote from Maya Angelou. And it says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that's really the central point to this entire blog post, because her point is, if you want to be remembered and you want people to know what you do and you want to be kind of associated in their mind with a certain kind of skill, you have to tie what you do to an emotional feeling, right? And so she has the example for herself where she was talking to, it was actually a taxi driver. And she said, well, I write about how to write better. And she knew that was kind of too esoteric of a way to describe it. So she said, I write about the human condition, right? Or which is a little bit clearer. But then she said, really the most simple thing is like, I write about love, that like how to connect with others in a clear, concise way. And by tying it down into a very simple emotional connection like love, she believes that's a really good way to be remembered, that taxi driver will remember her as someone who writes about love. So she provides some formulas for how you can do this yourself no matter what you do. It's a really interesting read. And this is the kind of thing where if you want to have a really good elevator pitch at a networking event and really get people's attention, or you really want to knock grandma off her chair at Thanksgiving dinner, this is the kind of thing you would say about when you're responding to what do you do for work. So again, it's on themuse.com. The blog post is called How to Tell People What You Do and Be Remembered, and we will have the link in the show notes.
So Ben, I got to ask, what do you do for a living?
I clean toilets, Mac. No, I think I go back to our what Maxless does, and I think that's how I ground a lot of talking about myself. And I usually say, like, I help people find meaningful work. And I do that a whole bunch of different ways, whether it's this podcast or an online course that we're doing or the blog or the books. It really boils down to helping people find meaning in their 9-to-5 or 12-to-12 jobs.
Great. That's a memorable explanation. Thanks for that. If you have a suggestion for Ben, please write him. His email address is easy to remember. It's ben@maxless.org. Now let's turn to you, our listeners. Jenna Forstrom, our community manager, is here, and she has a question from a listener. Jenna, what did you find in the mailbag this week?
Today's question comes from Sue Black, who asks, is there a great career coach for young, recent college grads? And the answer is yes, but it totally depends on where you live. And since this is a national podcast, I figured it would be a good way to pivot from just one great career coach for young kids and recent graduates, but to opportunities on how to find a good career coach. So some of the places that I checked out to look for a good career coach for younger people would be talking to your alumni organization. She asked for career grads, so I'm assuming that they've graduated from college or they're almost out of college. So definitely checking out with the school that they're at, what opportunities there are there, to just research local career coaches. So type into Google career coaches in Portland, Oregon, or New York City, or Topeka, Kansas, wherever you are, and just kind of read through their bios and get a feel for who they are and see if it would be a good fit. And maybe I feel like a lot of career coaches offer free tips, or they have a YouTube channel, or they're on a podcast, so you can kind of get a sense for free if it's worth the investment if you feel like you're going to vibe with them on a personal level. There's also a career coach that is based here in Portland, Oregon, that Maxless has a friendship with. Her name is Satya Bhatyak, and she's been on the podcast before. And she runs a career counseling coaching company called Quarter Life Counseling. And she has a whole list of resources of books and other publications about career coaching and like what to look for. So we'll include her website in the show notes. And then on a more fun level, I've been listening to this podcast called Another Round, and they have a lady who comes and speaks maybe every 5 to 6 episodes called Stacey Marie Ishmael, and she is the head of BuzzFeed's apps. So she's like technical, really high up, and she's a woman of color, and she just talks really, I want to say colorfully about like how to set up a LinkedIn profile and how to apply for a job. And she's just very blunt and very, for me personally, like she's really hilarious. So she'll be like, the first thing is if you spell Stacy wrong, I'm not going to hire you. You know, I'm going to try to give you the benefit of the doubt, but you know, dot your T's, cross your I's, double check spelling. So she's just a really fun way to like listen to like career advice. So we'll include a link to BuzzFeed's Another Round too on the podcast in our show notes. Mac and Ben, do you guys have any tips?
I think those are all good options. The other thing I would point out to Sue would be just to get really clear on what exactly you mean by a coach in this case, because I think there's 2 different things that might be going on for the recent grad. One is the kind of the big picture question, search for meaning. And that's something that I think a lot of people coming out of college have. It's what we call the quarter life crisis. And that's probably not, if you're struggling with that, that's probably not something that a career coach is the best person to help you at. They might be able to steer you in the right direction in terms of a job, but that might be something more along the lines of like a life coach, to use the best term I can think of. And someone like Paul Angoni, who's been on the show before, has talked a lot about this and focuses on helping young people find kind of the big picture and the meaning of how they want to dedicate their life. Then there's the other piece, which is the specific job search, you know, finding a job that fits with that meaning. That's where I think the career coach would come in handy. So just kind of get really clear about what you want of those 2 options and pick accordingly.
Yeah, I would add, once you're clear about the problem, shop around. And you can, either through recommendations from the sources Jenna mentioned, like alumni associations or career services offices, find, put together a short list of possible coaches and ask them. I would recommend interviewing up to 3 and just ask them how they would approach your specific problem. And also always ask for references. I think it's good to check with 1 or 2 people who've worked with a particular coach. And I would also add, I know you're a huge fan of Another Round. For the benefit of our listeners, I've been hearing Jenna play that podcast now for a couple of weeks. There's a lot of laughter that goes along with it. So definitely a show worth checking out.
I'm totally addicted, and it's hilarious.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. And Sue, thank you so much for emailing us.
Well, thank you, Jenna. And if you have a question for Jenna, please email her. Her address is Jenna, Jenna, @maxless.org. And you can call our listener line. The listener line number is area code 716 and then Job Talk, JOBTALK. These segments with Ben and Jenna are sponsored by Hack the Hidden Job Market, the new online course from MaxList. As many as 80% of all jobs never get posted. Instead, employers fill these openings by word of mouth. Our new course shows you how this hidden job market works. We teach you how to find plum gigs that never appear on a job board, how to stand out in a crowd of applicants, and how to connect with insiders who can help your career. In each of the course's 12 modules, you get the tools and tips you need to get the work you want. Meaningful work, work that makes a difference, work that you can love. Hack the Hidden Job Market launches November 1st. Don't wait. Get updates and lock in the early bird price now. Go to maxlist.org/course. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Don Hutcheson. Don Hutcheson is a lifelong entrepreneur, inventor, author, and coach. He hosts the daily podcast, Discover Your Talent, Do What You Love. Don has never had a boss. Instead, he's created 6 companies in advertising, publishing, coaching, and career planning over the last 40 years. Don joins us today from Charleston, South Carolina. Don, thanks for coming on the show.
It is such a pleasure to be having this conversation with you. I admire so much what you and your team are doing out there.
Well, that's very kind of you, and we're big fans of your podcast as well. We'll talk more about that, but one of the things I really like about your show is every day you interview successful people, and you've talked to almost 400 successful folks. And that's our topic today, what successful people do differently. And you found, Don, it's not an accident. It happens because people do specific things. Can you tell us more about that in general?
In the late 1980s, when I was in the ad business, and a person on my staff had gone through some assessments and stuff that led her from a private school to Brown University, and it just got me thinking about what she did, and I went through the assessment myself, and I just started digging deep into how we make decisions about perhaps the most important decision that we face in our lives. Who am I, and what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do it? And what I saw in 6 months or 9 months of just basic research is that it's more complicated times 1,000 than we're told. And so the people that, I think, frankly, there's not a perfect formula. I think the people that do it do a lot of different things, and so much of it is random. And what I see you doing so well, you and your team, and what we've been doing on the show, is trying to drill down into the various parts that go into a good plan about understanding yourself and what you want to do, so that people can start being a little more analytical about it on one hand, and then a little more intuitive about it on the other hand, if that makes sense.
It does. And I know you've identified specific qualities, actually a list of 12, that people have in common who are successful in the workplace and in life. And one of them is goals. Let's talk about goals. Why do they matter so much, Don, in creating success?
Well, they're critical, but before goals, my opinion after, like I said, 28 years, is that if you start out and you take full responsibility for self-knowledge and self-awareness and don't abdicate your decisions to the systems you live in, whether it's a family system or a school or a organization of any kind, until you realize that you are a part of that system and the systems have their own goals for you, not malicious, not some terrible insidious plot. It's just that if you work at IBM, IBM's got a bunch of goals. If you go to a good secondary school and you get accepted to Yale, they're real happy for you to go to Yale because it looks good on their pro forma. Maybe you should have gone to art school. So it's easy to be caught up in what we called in one of our books the lemming conspiracy. And that is, that legend of these Arctic rodents going over cliffs to their deaths en masse. It's conformity. It's mindless conformity. And that's what people around the world do regularly, except for those people who are just lucky enough, either by luck or by good trusting their instincts, to say, wait a minute, I'm going to think for me. So before you can have goals, you have to answer that. You have to understand that it's utterly complex, and you have to start out with, this is an inside job. I've got to take full responsibility. I've got to understand who I am spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, physically, and countless other ways, and then I can start building from that base and know that this is always my responsibility and it comes from me, and I can have mentors and I can study and read books and take What Color Is Your Parachute and go through assessments and all, but only if I take full responsibility and know that until I know myself as well as I can and keep on knowing myself, I'm never going to get what I want.
So that does sound complicated, the process that you described. How do people get through that, Don? And is it something that they do throughout their life?
There's a great book out there by a guy named Poe Brunson. You've probably read, What Should I Do With My Life? And I want to have, Poe, if you're out there, I want to have you on the show, so call me. A brilliant book. It's about 10 years old, and I have to say I'm embarrassed to say I didn't find out about it till a couple of years ago. And what Poe did, is he interviewed several hundred people, like we've done on podcasts, but he got to know them over a period of a couple of years. And he tells their stories brilliantly, and these people are very transparent and very honest. And what you see, Mac, in those stories, and what I learned doing the company that I started called the Highlands Company 28 years ago, is that there's like I said, it's a very complex problem, but if you break it apart and take responsibility for it and read some basic text and take some basic assessments and spend a lot of time journaling and reflecting on who you are and what you want, and then learning from people who've done what you want to do, then you increase the odds exponentially of getting what you want. And P.S., every 6 or 7 years, as psychologists have told us for 100 years, we go through these things called turning points. And at those turning points, they happen literally since the day we're born almost. And when you go through those, if you've been a good student of yourself and of life, then you're prepared to, it's like good nutrition. Then you stay healthy if you keep learning and keep growing and keep nourishing yourself with good information about what works and what doesn't.
So it's a lifelong process. Recognize that you're going to go through these turning points, you call them, every 6 or 7 years, and self-assessment and knowing yourself is going to help you navigate those changes.
Well, even Aristotle said knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, and it is. I mean, how many people in your life, acquaintances and people that you run across, that you think are really have a good self-understanding? Peter Drucker said it beautifully in an article in Harvard Business Review, which is knowing oneself or something like that, managing oneself. He said most people think they know what they're good at. They're usually wrong. And furthermore, they're not even good at knowing what they're not good at. So Drucker was a pretty smart guy, creating great work till he was 90-something years old. So if that's the case, then it's almost like we live in a world where we react. Hey, Mac, you're great with people. You'd be great in sales. You heard from the guy when you graduated from college. So you go into sales. Or, I told you in a pre-interview I was going to take a teaching job, and a guy threw out an opportunity for a magazine. And for reasons known only to the universe, I said okay and set off on never having a boss and being an entrepreneur. So there's luck tied with self-awareness, tied with just a continuous mindset of I want to keep getting better and trying to just improve who I am and what I can contribute.
So how do you act on that self-awareness, Don? How do you see people once they are in touch with themselves and they know their strengths and they're listening to their instincts? How do they act on that and get what they want in their career, in their workplace, and in life?
Well, they found a structure. It's a great question. That's part of what those 12 tenets were, and that's just one look at it. You can cut this several different ways. But they, if they do the basics, realizing it's an inside job, it's a lot more complex than we're led to believe. If they take responsibility for chiseling out a purpose, find a good course. Read What Color Is Your Parachute, for heaven's sakes. I mean, that man has sold 10 million copies over 40 years, and he's got a blueprint. Read Poe Brunson's What Should I Do With My Life? Read Don't Waste Your Talent by Dr. Bob McDonnell and yours truly. I mean, there's scores of books. Try to get away from the motivational stuff. That's all fine, but I was born motivated, and you probably were too. I don't need a lot of help on being motivated, but I do need help on everything else, on self-awareness, understanding the marketplace. There's a guy, Ben Green, that we had on our show talking about the fact that what are the stats? Let me look over here. 3 billion people want jobs in the world, and there's 1.2 billion jobs available, so that leaves 1.8 billion people out of luck. And what Ben has done, this guy from South Carolina, is helped the readers around the world understand this is how you prepare yourself for the global marketplace. Understanding that emotional intelligence is the kids that come out of college have the skills to do it, but they fail. The majority of them fail. The couple of million that graduate from college this year, 1.5 million, they fail because they don't understand emotional intelligence. They don't understand how to collaborate and problem solve and work creatively. So just sort of, it's too bad we don't teach courses on this. But that's the kind of research you need to do. And I don't want to scare off your listeners into thinking you've got to get 5 PhDs in career planning. It's really not any more complicated than listening to some of these principles on your show and what y'all are doing and on our show, and just digging in and realizing that you're going to, as you said, you're going to set some good goals once you know who you are. You're going to surround yourself with people that really wish the best for you and can give you objective feedback. You're going to realize it's the scariest thing you'll ever do, but you can do it. We learn more from failure than victories. Be disciplined as a son of a gun, because without discipline, nothing happens. And then finally, trust your instincts, because at the end, whether you're religious or spiritual or whatever it is, that's where the answers are, and that wee small voice inside.
One of the factors you mentioned just a moment ago, and on your list of 12 qualities that make a difference, is accepting failure. Why is that important? Often people are afraid of failure and think that it's actually not a predictor of success at all.
Yeah, well, it's an illusion, because the reason, what happens is, again, this is one man's opinion, but I've studied it almost 30 years, so I guess I have a right to that opinion. But we live in the stress cycle. We're outer-directed. We're short-term oriented. We're wealth, status, and power oriented, especially in this country. I'm an entrepreneur. I think wealth is fine to a point, but then it sort of turns back on you. If we were more inner-directed and values-oriented and long-term oriented, then we could sort of make strategic decisions instead of knee-jerk reactions. So we get into a role. Maybe we went to law school and we're in a law firm, and we wake up one day before we make partner and realize we hate it. Well, that's a big change. You've invested 6 or 7 or 8 years of your life. Or maybe we set off in a sales job with a big company and realize we really want to be a counselor. Well, what could be more daunting? You've got a spouse or a mate, and you may have kids, and you've got responsibilities. So I don't poo-poo any of those scary, anybody having fear. It's just that what happens if you stay the course and you're miserable and you're not using your talents or your best skills. I mean, I don't know much worse than that. There's a way to break it off into bite-sized chunks and be mindful about it. Journal. People say, what's the first thing you do? Stop. Oh, that's glib. What do you mean by stop? I mean, take a little time every day for yourself. Quiet time. 15 or 20 minutes, and just start thinking how you feel and what you might want. Maybe you stay in the same company, but you're in a different area of that company. And so it's just sort of being conscious enough to think about that, the time we have here is rather precious, and for ourselves and for the good of the order, it'd be better if we, in my opinion, if we just made maximum use of what those talents are, and it starts from within.
So Don, like a lot of folks, I imagine you had this experience too. My folks told me the company I kept as I was growing up mattered. And in your list of 12 qualities, you identify that as a factor, the people we surround ourselves influence us. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think it's about as essential as it gets. You are the sum result of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. I think that if you surround yourself, you seek them out. There are all kinds of networking groups, or there are all kinds of organizations. If you have the confidence enough just to get out there into the field you're in or into another field and try to find like-minded people who have the same values base and the same using the best of their talents and the best of who they are, the families want what they want for us because they love us for the most part, and we have to listen to ourselves and find that teacher or that person out in the business world or the professional world or the artistic world who can give us another perspective, because they're not stuck in the lemming conspiracy, and they don't have anything to gain either way. They just want to share their truth about what they're doing.
Great. Well, this has been a rewarding conversation, Don. What else would you like to add?
I guess there's a great quote that I saw the other day from J.R.R. Tolkien. Not all of those who wander are lost. I think when people express indecision at different junctures of their lives, that's seen as weakness, and I think it's the greatest indication of courage. Plenty of people stay the course for 40 years and have great careers and add value, but they're in the minority. That 1% that really love what they do, and the reason we do the show, and I think the reason you do what you do, is it's possible to turn that 87% around the world and that 72% in this country to a much higher percentage of people that are satisfied by just doing some of the basic principles that you share all the time and that we share. And I just encourage people to keep on doing that and not being afraid to take the road less traveled.
Well, terrific, Don. Tell us what's next for you. What's coming up?
The podcast has grown really nicely and continues to grow, the weekly show, and I'm really excited about that. And your listeners know well, we want to offer membership groups where we can, on Facebook and other modalities, and we want to offer courses, I created courses back in the during the 90s, offer courses because that's where education is happening, is online, where people can do the things that you and I have been discussing in the last 15 or 20 minutes. So membership sites where people can go, and there are experts that come on every week and talk about everything from emotional intelligence to natural abilities to negotiating your salary. And so we're going to be doing that between now and the end of the year, and continuing to spread the
Well, thanks, Don. We'll be sure to include a link to your website. And to find your show, people can visit discoveryourtalentpodcast.com. And we'll include that link in the show notes as well. Thank you for joining us on the show this week.
It's a great pleasure. I wish you and your team continued great success.
Okay, we're back at the Max List studio with Jenna and Ben. Now, tell me, you two, what do you think of the conversation with Don?
I thought it was a great conversation, and I think Don brought up 2 points that I think enforce each other, or they go together. And one is the talk about the lemming conspiracy, which I think all of us have gone through at some point in our life, where we're living someone else's goals or someone else's agenda, or what we think we're supposed to be doing. And like, I know certainly in my life after I graduated from college, I thought like my parents expected me to go to grad school, or my friends were all going to grad school, so that's what I should do. And it wasn't until I went to grad school and absolutely hated it that I realized, oh, this isn't really what I want to be doing. And that feeds into the second point of, accepting failure. Because I think it's foolish of us to think that we're going to have all the answers ourselves ahead of time. And part of life is like you live it, and it's a process, and you just need to be living it with your eyes opened. And sometimes you find yourself in a position, whether you're like me and you're in grad school and you really didn't like it, or you're in a job that you really don't like, or some other situation in life where you say, this isn't working for me, and I'm not a failure if I just choose to step back and do something different. And I've heard people say like the most effective people are the people who quickly figure out that something's failing and then quit early, right? The difference between success and failure is learning when you're going to quit.
Jenna?
I really liked his J.R.R. Tolkien quote, which is funny because I see that on bumper stickers all the time, but
I see it in Portland all the time.
Yeah,
too.
it's like a huge bumper sticker. It's all over Portland.
Maybe not so much in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah, but I also don't really like Lord of the Rings, which I feel bad admitting to because a lot of my friends love them. But I do like the Sunblock song that came out when I was in middle school. And I pulled up the quotes. It reminds me a lot of this J.R.R. Tolkien thing. And it says, "Don't feel guilty if you don't know what you're going to do with your life. The most interesting people I know didn't know at 22 what they were going to do with their lives. And some of the most interesting 40-year-olds I know still don't." And I've kind of held on to that because I feel like it's really relevant to like, not all who wander are lost. It's like, we're just all trying to figure out our lives together. And I think if you tie it back to what he was saying about emotional intelligence, and when we talk to a lot of people who do career pivots, or they're about to do a career pivot and they like mentally get really stressed out, like finances or their family, or they have kids, or if they have to go back to school, and they get stuck in this fear mentality. But it's like, if you can be interesting and if you can self-acknowledge, like, I'm in this job, I'm miserable, and I need to make a shift and I need to pivot, like, that's an interesting story. And when you're talking to recruiters, or you're talking to jobs or employers or job hunters or whoever, if you have an interesting story that relates back to like why you're making that shift, it's interesting and it attracts people. And I feel like you're going to be way more successful if you just stop and admit it and move on. So don't beat yourself up, people.
Yeah, a job is not a life sentence. And the point that I heard Don make that I really responded to was this idea of these turning points every 6 or 7 years, because I see people who have had successful careers. They've done different things, and they might not be on a 6 or 7 year cycle. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10 years, but they're not afraid to try. And that goes back to your point, Ben, about not being afraid of failure and trying something new. So there's a lot of good food for thought there. Well, thank you, Ben and Jenna, and thank you, Don, for joining us. And thank you all, our listeners, for joining us for today's episode of Find Your Dream Job. If you like what you hear, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In each issue, we give you the key points of that week's show. We also include links to all the resources mentioned, and you get a transcript of the full episode. If you subscribe to the newsletter now, we'll send you the Job Seeker Checklist. In one easy-to-use file, we show you all the steps you need to take to find a great job. Get your free newsletter and checklist today. Go to maxlist.org/podcast. And join us next Wednesday when our special guest will be Angela Copeland. She'll explain how to make the most of your next networking event. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.